The outsider challenging the establishment. But can Bernie Sanders turn his New Hampshire victory into a campaign for the presidency? Also on today's program, from umbrella movement to fishbowl revolution, the changing face of Hong Kong's protests. And in Picture This, confrontation on the Korean peninsula as the North accuses the South of a declaration of war. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. 16 years in the House of Representatives, followed by 8 in the Senate. So how did a small-time, long-serving senator from Vermont suddenly find himself a front-runner for the Democratic presidential nomination? Well, he began his campaign last April at a time when this Democratic primary was expected to be a coronation of sorts for former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. 10 months on, and after narrowly missing out in the Iowa caucus, his victory in the New Hampshire primary was not entirely unexpected, but it was the scale of it, 22 percentage points ahead of Clinton, that took many by surprise. Today's newsmaker is this man, Bernie Sanders, as we ask if the tide has turned in the race for the Democratic nomination.
This country needs political revolution. Wall Street does not end its greed. Millionaires and billionaires. Inequality, 1%. The 1%.
Of the beginning of a political
revolution.
A Washington outsider and a Democratic socialist is now a frontrunner for the Democrat presidential candidacy. After a narrow loss in Iowa, 74-year-old Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders has won the New Hampshire primary by more than 20 points.
Thank you, New Hampshire.
But where did Bernie Sanders and his political revolution come from? He was born in Brooklyn, New York to Jewish parents, and in the 1960s and 70s was a civil rights and anti-war activist. He first tried to run for the Vermont Senate in 1971. In 1980, he was elected mayor of Burlington, Vermont, serving 4 terms. He was elected to the US House in 1990 and won the seat for the US Senate in 2007. Bernie Sanders wants universal healthcare, to hold Wall Street to account and end inequality. He is against what he says is a self-serving establishment and wants to end the influence of lobbyists on Washington. Bernie Sanders has gone from a long-shot candidate to Hillary Clinton's main contender. While they agree on some areas, on many other policies, they are in different corners. On healthcare, Clinton wants to keep Obamacare, allow the government to negotiate drug prices, and place more restrictions on advertising, while Sanders wants a single-payer system, Medicare to negotiate drug prices, and discounts for seniors to be restored. On Wall Street, Clinton wants a risk fee on bank loans, to tax high-frequency trading, and to enforce the Obama administration's regulation reform, the Dodd-Frank Act. Sanders wants to tax speculative trading, to fund tuition-free college, and to break up major financial institutions. On the fight against Daesh, they don't see eye to eye. Clinton advocates heavy US involvement, but no ground troops. She supports training moderate Syrian rebels and a no-fly zone. But Sanders says the region should deal with the problem, and he opposes training rebels and the no-fly zone. Sanders' critics accuse him of toning down his more radical left-wing views, landing his policy punches closer to the middle for mass appeal. But supporters say he's been consistent on the economy and inequality, and what he's calling for are the things that most people want. He's giving the Democratic Socialist title a PR makeover, seen now as a popular and viable alternative for mainstream voters. Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to discuss the so-called Sanders sensation in Detroit is Neil Soroka. He's a communications director at Democracy for America. And Nate Harrer, a blogger for the Huffington Post. He joins us from Ithaca in New York State. Gentlemen, thanks a lot for joining us. Neil Soroka, why are so many of you feeling the burn? What's in the secret sauce?
I mean, I think the secret sauce is a combination of the decades that Senator Sanders has been fighting on these issues of income inequality. In a lot of ways, we like to say that sometimes a politician meets the moment. In this case, a moment met the politician who has literally been fighting on these things for years. And I think, combined with that long-term fight on income inequality, you've got a real, by proxy, a real authenticity. I think people are really hungry for the kind of authentic willingness to take on wealthy and powerful interests that Bernie Sanders has been talking about throughout his career and, throughout this campaign.
Neil, isn't it strange that those who support Trump are also looking for authenticity? What's up with that?
In some ways it's strange. I mean, let's be clear. There are two. It's hard to identify two candidates that are further apart on the issues than Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. But it's true. I think Americans across the ideological spectrum want authentic candidates who are willing to stand up and call out, big, powerful interests. I think, the problem with Donald Trump, however, is that he's a part of those big, powerful interests that he thinks he's calling out. And he's oftentimes advocating for, frankly, racist policies that have no business in the American public stage.
And before I get a response from Nate, Neil, do you believe that Hillary Clinton is a part of those big, powerful interests?
I mean, I think that there is no doubt that Secretary Clinton is a incredibly powerful, strong candidate. I think she speaks for a lot of Democrats in the Democratic Party. I think Senator Sanders is kind of the insurgent candidate here. And I think it'll be interesting to see. I'm going to leave it up to the voters to decide who they think is going to be the most powerful advocate in our fight against the wealthy and powerful interests that dominate too much of American politics.
Nate, why is Hillary Clinton the answer and not Bernie Sanders? Because Neil makes a pretty strong case for him.
Well, Nick Kristof wrote an article in the New York Times about a week ago that posed two questions that Senator Sanders hasn't really been able to sufficiently answer yet. The first being, how would a Sanders administration feasibly bring a coalition of Arab states together to defeat ISIS, because that's been his primary platform for dealing with ISIS. The second major question is how he would accomplish these massive overhauls of healthcare and banking and education that he lauds and promises on the stump, but hasn't given a realistic outline for how he could accomplish those reforms in a Congress that is so gridlocked and is currently controlled by the Republicans, and that fact is not likely to change in this coming election.
Yeah, those are good points. Neil, similar to, I guess, President Obama saying he wanted to close Guantanamo Bay within a year, and then he had to deal with Congress, and for the bulk of his presidency, a Republican-led Congress. Isn't Bernie Sanders going to face the same thing day after day, year after year if he becomes president?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there is no doubt that if a Democrat gets elected, and hopefully a Democrat will, I think, Nate and I can both agree, we want a Democrat elected in November. That is going to be one of our top priorities, between the party. But let's be clear, whether it's Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton, we're all going to face the challenge of dealing with, most likely, a Republican Congress and a Republican House and a Republican Senate. And that's, Nick Kristof is not the first one to raise this argument, and I guess I'd say it's unclear to me how Secretary Clinton is going to get done any of these things that she's proposing if we limit it to the Congress that we have today. Part of, why I think Senator Sanders is having some of these early wins and getting people fired up is because he's saying we're not going to, if we want to have this political revolution, if we really want to change things in a big, important, powerful way, we need to make sure that we elect more Democrats to the Senate and build a rising tide of progressives to take back the Senate, increase our foothold in the House, and do better down the road. I think that's really how we're going to do this. And I think Senator Sanders is calling for that. And frankly, he's building the movement that it would take to do that. When you win by 20 points, the second largest victory ever seen in the New Hampshire primary, I think you've got the foundations of a political movement that actually has a chance to take back power and flip the calculus that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah. Nate, what makes you think that Hillary Clinton is more equipped to deal with foreign policy than Bernie Sanders?
I think just the fact that she can articulate a clear vision of what an American foreign policy and an American grand strategy would look like under a Clinton administration. I mean, if you listen to any of the answers Sanders gives in any of the debates since this campaign has started about very normal issues that you would expect the candidates to be able to have a firm grasp of, whether that's maritime tensions in the South China Sea or dealing with a creeping Russia in Eastern Europe, or even just Iran, ISIS, the core issues in the Middle East that candidates have been expected to deal with for years now. Sanders hasn't been able to articulate a clear vision of how his presidency would handle these issues. The only thing he brings up
been at the table.
is
Sorry to
that
interrupt
he
you.
would create a coalition of Arab states. And there's no evidence to suggest that a Sanders administration would be more equipped to build this coalition than the Obama administration. This is something the Obama administration has been trying to construct for years. And this is even less likely to happen now that the Saudis have completely cut off their relations with Iran.
Sure. Nate, if you'll allow me, I mean, she's been at the table. She was Secretary of State.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
We can judge her according to her track record, but we cannot judge Bernie Sanders because he's never been in that sort of position. He's been a congressman, he's been a senator, right?
Yeah.
Could you name one achievement for me, Nate, while she was Secretary of State that stands out for you, that makes her well equipped to be Commander-in-Chief? Nate?
Hillary Clinton was one of the key architects of the sanctions legislation that crippled the Iranian economy and brought them to the negotiating table, and was a prerequisite for the negotiations with Iran and the European Union and several other key states for the Iranian nuclear agreement that we've already seen dividends from.
Okay. Neil Soroka, the Iran deal, Hillary Clinton was an architect of it.
I don't. Yeah, listen, and listen, the Iran deal was a tremendous achievement by the administration, and frankly, was a real victory for kind of that sort of foreign policy vision. And listen, I don't think anyone's doubting that Secretary Clinton is an expert on foreign policy. She did a great job in the Obama administration, especially guided by the president's view that force has to be limited in every moment possible. But let's be clear. I think part of the reason why Americans across the country have been attracted to Bernie Sanders is because of his willingness to stand up and take a stand against wealthy and powerful interests that dominate our economy. And that doesn't end, frankly, at the end of the borders of the United States. Bernie Sanders leading from the very beginning in the fight against the job-killing Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's an aspect of foreign policy. We need to talk about how these trade agreements impact our relationships with other countries and build solidarity among workers across nations rather than pitting workers against one another. And let's also talk about the fact that if we're really going to have a political revolution in this country, we need to end the stranglehold that the military-industrial complex has on our politics as well.
Okay, I want to get a final thought from Nate. There have been some interesting turns of phrase from Neil. Solidarity among workers around the world, the military-industrial complex, ending big money, big interest, etc. As a Democrat, would you be uncomfortable if Bernie Sanders becomes the candidate? Would you be uncomfortable with Bernie Sanders, socialist, representing you as a Democrat?
Absolutely not. Bernie Sanders, when it comes to Bernie Sanders as a person, there aren't many negative things I can say. I think there's only really positive things I can say. He's a very honest person, he's a very genuine person, and he has a very long and storied record of fighting for the marginalized, fighting for the underprivileged. I admire Bernie Sanders very much, and I think any aspiring public servant ought to admire Bernie Sanders very much. I think he absolutely, if he were the Democratic nominee, I'd be proud to campaign for him.
Okay, gentlemen, we have run out of time. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Neil Soroka and Nate Hara. Thank you very much. Still to come on the Newsmakers, we ask what's really behind Hong Kong's fishbowl revolution. And in Picture This, provocation and pressure on the Korean peninsula. The fallout from the North's rocket launch continues. It's been called the fishbowl revolution, a night of violent protests after authorities tried to shut down illegal food stalls during the Lunar New Year. It was the biggest public display of discontent at China's policies since 2014's umbrella movement. And as Sandra Gatman reports, it's unlikely to be the last.
Hong Kong rung in the new Chinese lunar calendar as it does every year in spectacular style. Festivities, food and shoppers filled the streets. The Mong Kong district was as vibrant as ever. But on the very first day of the Year of the Monkey, the celebrations were over. Hong Kong police suddenly moved in to clear illegal street stalls, attracting hundreds of protesters. The demonstrations turned violent, and then an officer fired 2 warning shots in the air and pointed his pistol at the crowd. A new turning point in the escalating battle between Hong Kong's government and pro-democracy activists. This time they called it the Fishbowl Revolution, a spontaneous protest similar to the last time unrest gripped Hong Kong in 2014, when pro-democracy protesters criticized China's control over local elections. Dubbed the Umbrella Revolution, it was a sign of growing discontent over Beijing's grip on the semi-autonomous island. Anger was soon directed at the Hong Kong police for their use of force, which included pepper spraying protesters. Camps were dismantled, but tensions remained, only to surface again this week when street vendors fought eviction. Overnight, around 300 rioters took to the streets and violence erupted, leading to more than 130 people being injured on both sides. Social media users once again criticized an excessive use of force by police. After more than 60 arrests, the streets of Mong Kok are calm again, but the issue remains unresolved.
The SAR government strongly condemns such violent acts. The police will apprehend the mobs and bring them to justice.
Hong Kong's authorities are determined to clamp down on rioting, fearing instability could hurt the city's economy, reliant on foreign investment and international business. But anti-establishment movements have grown. Students have been protesting against a pro-establishment academic being placed in charge of the University of Hong Kong. A number of outspoken groups are increasingly calling for full independence from China, but Beijing has largely remained silent, saying it's preserving the one country, two system arrangement. Sandra Gatman, The Newsmakers.
Well, to analyze those protests further, I'm joined from Hong Kong by the chairperson of the Democratic Party, Emily Lau. Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Lau. So let's be clear about all of this.
Hello.
This is not about fish balls, is it?
Not really. It's about people's discontent, anger and frustration exploding in the streets of Mong Kok.
Do you think this government is going to give the protesters, from the politicians like yourself who support the protesters, to those vendors and others, do you think the government is going to give in to what they want for greater freedoms if they continue to attack policemen? Or do you think that they're just going to double down and get more vicious and get more ruthless?
Well, I think this government of Mr. C.Y. Leung is very tough. And few people in Hong Kong expect him to change its way and to listen more to the people of Hong Kong. So people are all really fastening their seatbelt for more troubles ahead. But having said that, I must say that my party and many Hong Kong people do not support using force and violence. Although we are very unhappy with the government, but we do not think that fighting with the policemen using violence will solve our problems.
Try to demystify this for us. From the outside, Hong Kong is a very prosperous place, yet we're seeing scenes of people being disgruntled, disillusioned, lashing out. Why is it?
Well, I think partly with Mr. C.Y. Leung, who's been in power for more than 3 years, and also before him, the chief executive, Donald Tsang, also did quite poorly. So because of their inaction, because of their failure to help Hong Kong, we are lagging behind in many areas. And particularly, the people are very upset with housing. Many people are waiting to get into public housing, and they live in tiny cubicles. The healthcare system is also bursting at its seams. People have to wait more than 24 hours at the casualty before they can admit it into hospital. And in terms of education, many university students are heavily in debt because they do not get free education, and they get a loan, and after they graduate, they have to pay for many years. So there is a lot of discontent, and especially young people feel that they don't have a future. So if they say there's nothing but hopelessness, so they say we can't change it within the system, so let us fight. And this is very, very bad for Hong Kong.
Does the real decision need to be made by China in terms of loosening things up a little bit and allowing more democratic freedoms?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And last year, we lost an opportunity to go for universal suffrage. So Beijing is very much in charge, and it's Beijing and their tycoons who put Mr. C.Y. Leung there as chief executive. And so it is, I certainly agree with you that if Beijing sees what's going on here and all the attention from the international community, and even from Turkey. I mean, this is the second time I talked to a news organization from Turkey, and I welcome it. But if we look at the situation at your end of the world, of course, things seem to be a lot more explosive. But in Hong Kong, we are used to being a peaceful city. But now it seems the whole thing is degrading, and it is very worrying.
And very finally, almost going back to my first question, what guarantees can you give that the leadership among the opposition and those backing the protesters ensure that protests don't turn to riots, don't turn to attacking cops, to give the cops a pretext to crack down?
Well, first of all, I want to let you know that many people in the opposition, including my party, we do not support the use of violence. We condemn it in no uncertain terms. But if people have grievances, people are anxious, they are angry, okay, we think the government should listen to them and have a dialogue. But we are not here to back any form of violence, let alone a revolution. And we certainly hope that the administration of Mr. Leung will change its ways and start talking to the young people, talking to those who are very unhappy, talking to the opposition like myself, and try to find a way out for Hong Kong.
Emily Lau, great to talk to you. Thank you very much. In today's Picture This, US officials have expressed concern over North Korea's latest rocket launch. The move has been internationally condemned, with Washington accusing Pyongyang of using the launch to test its intercontinental ballistic missile capabilities. Let's take a look.
North Korea's nuclear weapons program and evolving ballistic missile programs are a continuing threat.
Today's newsmaker has been Bernie Sanders. The Democratic presidential hopeful heads to South Carolina looking to build on his New Hampshire primary victory. But he'll know that he will start behind Hillary Clinton. Word of the Sanders sensation has been slow to reach some corners of America, and his long-established rival is, for now, more popular among minority voters. But the 74-year-old has made up ground on the Clinton camp before, and New Hampshire suggests the calls for Bernie are loud and getting much louder. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Gupta. As always, thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.